Go.
All right, and we're live. So, Dan,
Greetings. Greetings. Okay, no, I'm done. Hello, Joy.
hello. I'm going to ask you questions.
Alrighty.
If you just don't like a question, you can be like, pass, and we'll go on to the next one.
Sure thing.
All right, so what is
What is
hierarchy?
your name? Pass. Sorry, no.
Nope, sorry, this is just like way too personal. We're not going to get into that. All right, no. Okay, what is hierarchy? And can you give examples of hierarchies?
Oh boy. Okay, this is gonna be fun. So one of my favorite things that I read, like I think within the past year, is this, this nice little, probably completely bullshit, like infographic of the way that hierarchies work in various cultures. I mean, I think hierarchy in the most general sense is just the relationship, like the propensity that people within some sort of social network have of enacting certain behaviors towards others. So, like deferring or dominating or whatever. Um, and here in Australia, I agree with the idea that our hierarchies are very based on like informal personal characteristics. So people tend to rise to leadership positions just by virtue of, being organized or being charismatic or um, being willing to like take initiative. And I notice a lot in the social groups I'm in that there are certain people that are considered or that are treated in a way where statistically no one will ever treat them badly, and they command a lot of respect and authority. But not in the, like some sort of authoritarian leader or anything. These are just people that are treated better than others. Um, and then, obviously every now and then you wind up in a group, or the group changes such that someone winds up on the bottom of the hierarchy, and they're the person that everyone sort of, teases more frequently and listens to less. Although I think there's like a lot of different, mm, I guess, parameters or whatever. So in my computer science group, for instance, there was someone that joined a year ago, and because he was new and young and kind of really passive, everyone always teased him a lot. But because he's a really good programmer and very intelligent, we always looked to him for advice on how to program. So there's like multiple overlapping hierarchies within any social network. So in the programming hierarchy, I guess he was quite high, but in the being treated well hierarchy, he was not as high. Hmm. I think off the top of my head, that's about everything.
All right,
I
so
mean, obviously, there's formal power structures that exist every now and then, but I generally try to avoid groups that have those. Like, I like university because everything is very much based on like interpersonal stuff.
okay, so you are aware of hierarchies. When you are in a situation where there's a hierarchy present, do you feel like you need to follow it?
Mm, I think often to an extent, yes. Like, I often act very deferential with my professors and people that are potentially going to be unpredictable if you don't show respect to them. But if it feels like a relatively riskless situation, and I think this also comes in, I think this is also the result of being an Australian. I tend to treat people in a very egalitarian way.
Right. Do you feel the need to structure information? And if you do, for what purpose? And how do you do it?
Mm. Well, I think everything that I just said implies like a certain level of implicit structuring, but most of the structures I learn are, well, they're learned from other people. Like I like coming, like I enjoy the intellectual exercise of perceiving reality in terms of, narratives and structures. And most of my own original thought is much more fast and loose. Like I have certain sort of intellectual themes or lemmas or whatever that I tend to perceive the world through. Like I really love the idea, like the most tenuous, overstretched generalization possible of the idea of a narrative or a story. Like I think even maths is a certain form of a narrative. But it's
Just
obviously not like a mythological or a fictional narrative. So in that sense, it is like narrative is just horribly distorted because it fits the same sort of it fits into the same loose category things as far removed from each other as mathematics and physics and the Aeneid. But
Okay,
I
so
think they do share certain structurals, or they do share certain like abstract properties in common that means that my idea of a narrative is useful. What was the
okay,
original question again?
I don't remember. I do have another one though. How do you define narrative? Like that sounds like it's something that's important to you. What is a narrative?
In the most general sense, I think it's just a model of reality. So, and I think that's how people use narrative very frequently. But there are more concrete ways in which, a narrative is a sequence of events. And it's a way of interpreting a sequence of events and interpolating between points of observation that you've made. The sorts of narratives I'm most interested in are those ideas of like shared mythologies and shared ideas about what reality is. Because I think when you get down to the very, very basic most idea of what everything is, then you get down to words and ideas and stories and models rather than any actual thing. Like, show me a quark, show me a picture of a quark. You can't, but you can show me an equation in which a quark exists. And you can show me experiments in which quarks show up again and again and again and again and again. So to that extent, quarks exist, but they only exist within the sense, or they only exist in the way of being there every time we try to go looking for them. It's not like you can point me at the sun and say that's the sun, but you can't point me at a quark and say that's a quark.
All right. So I'm going to kind of paraphrase just to make sure that I understand you properly.
Mhm.
So basically, you're saying that our perception of reality is essentially a story, a series of events that we tell ourselves.
Pretty much. I mean, like some stories are more true than others, and oh, that's another form of hierarchy. It's not a social hierarchy, but it's like it is in the mathematical sense like a partial ordering. So it's like some stories are far more consistent than other stories. Like you can't go looking for Aeneas and find him anywhere because like he only exists in the Aeneid, right? Or like within, was he an actual historical figure? I can't remember. Um, if he was, then that's like another example. Like you can't go looking for the mythological Aeneas and find him in the historical record. Anyway, sorry, I just got sidetracked because like there's like several different Jesuses. Like there's the mythological Jesus and there's a historical Jesus, and they the people writing stories about the mythological Jesus were really good at writing the mythological Jesus into historical situations, which is a really interesting like form of storytelling that I think we've kind of no, I guess we still use it every now and then. Anyway, yeah. So, but like a mathematical narrative is more consistent and coherent than a mythological narrative. Like what I was saying. Like you can go looking for quark and you can find it, even if you can't apprehend it.
Okay. All right. So next question: what is beauty? Do you change your opinion about beauty? And does your understanding correlate with the generally accepted notion?
Mm. Oh man. Okay, so let me just do a quick Google. Like aesthetics is one of the things that's part of the ever evolving and kind of vaguely sophomoric discourse of art. Like, mm, I think there's a certain standard of beauty, or there's a certain conception of beauty that everyone agrees on. It's anything that is aesthetically pleasing in a direct way. Like, I don't think anyone finds Renaissance paintings or late Renaissance paintings not beautiful, unless they're like incredible snobs and they're like, it doesn't have any spirit itself. That's a very like refined and cultivated sense of aesthetics that you have to develop. Like you have to go out of your way to conceive of the world in such terms. I think beauty on a neurological level is just anything that is naturally rewarding to perceive through the senses. Like, we love trees, and we love water, and we love other things that are good for us, and that are somehow innately rewarding for our senses. But I think you can, and I've alluded to this, like, I think you can develop a sense of beauty. Like, aesthetics is, to a certain extent, an interplay between your personal intellectual development and what sorts of aesthetics you internalize from intellectual sources in the environment around you. And I think I don't know, like, and I think beauty is a thing that sort of develops and changes with society, because there's always going to be large players that develop out of some sort of, you know, expired milieu. And so things like go through this period, like
Like in
30
the
years
90s,
ago.
everybody had thin eyebrows, and now like thick eyebrows are the thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, although I was thinking of, you know, back in the 80s and early 90s, the cool thing for comics and movies was everything was dark and gritty, and then that sort of fell out of fashion, and now it's back in fashion again. And that is the result of, like, periodicity and time lags in society's notions of aesthetics. And I think like, most of my intellectual developments are fairly slow. Like, I'll tend to stick with one idea, and it's always a process of evolution. Like, either, or sometimes, you know, like punctuated equilibrium. Like, there's slow, gradual iterations, and then maybe I'll find something that I find really compelling and change my entire worldview. But that happens fairly infrequently. And I think my notions of beauty are perhaps less cynical than what's currently fashionable, because I think what's fashionable is very, very misguided, very unrealistic, and way, way too focused on, you know, darkness, tragedy, and grit. Ugh. Like, has no one in today's world read Joseph Campbell? That is not what myth and storytelling is about. Anyway, that's my opinion.
All right, perfect. How do you create comfort and coziness? And how do others evaluate your skill in doing so? And do you agree with them?
Coziness? I don't know. Comfort, I think most people describe me as being a very relaxing individual. I don't know, it doesn't seem like that. No. Sorry, I'm just, like, slightly overstimulated right now. I have anxiety problems, so every now and then I just get, like adrenaline rushes, because, oh my god, I'm interacting with people I don't know.
Yeah, this is the first time we've done a hangout in like way too long, too.
Yeah, and also, like, it's an interview, so I am. I suppose I'm anxious. Like, I don't feel anxious, but I recognize the signs of anxiety. Anyway,
It's, it's cool. I mean, like, I think pretty much everybody, unless they're really accustomed to it because they do it so often, I think pretty much everybody gets a little bit anxious when they know that they're being recorded.
yeah, and, like, even, like, people delivering speeches, like, even experienced lecturers, unless they've done the same lecture hundreds of times, will, you know, exhibit a very, very different persona than how they normally are. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, what was the question again?
I have a new question for you, actually.
Right. Oh, comfort and coziness. That's right. Yeah. No, I think I like physical comfort. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I guess I try to look after people. Like, you know, throw blankets over them, offer them tea. But I am very self-neglectful, just because I think, I don't know. I have better things to do with my time than like, look after myself beyond the bare minimum necessary.
Okay.
And, you know, like, I'd much rather go for a walk than cook myself a delicious meal. But okay, so comfort. Like I look after people. I think I'm quite friendly. And I do my best to, you know, show concern for people's emotional well-being. And it pays off because people describe me as being a very, very relaxing, like almost universally, a very relaxing and comforting individual. Okay, next one.
I see where they're coming from. Okay, so let's say. All right, so how do people determine the quality of work? For example, if a job is being done well or if it's being done poorly. And how do you determine the quality of such work? And, um, does it match up?
Mm, wow, it's hard to say because like various different, like my experience is basically purely through university because that's been my life for the past 7 years. Um, and like different departments, even different lecturers within those departments have different like cognitive processes and different protocols, and what have you. And I think, unfortunately, one of the really big components is whether the professor knows and likes you or not, um, and any sort of biases they bring to the work, unless there's a well-established protocol and rubric. Um, but having said that, I am notoriously awful at evaluating the quality of my own work. Like, because I think to do that requires either a well-established external standard or an understanding of the way that the person evaluating your stuff tends to evaluate those things. And university is often very anonymous in that regard, and occasionally the former standard isn't very well implemented. And I recently ran into that with one of my units, because there's just like no obvious standard. There's a bunch of vague things that don't really mean anything, and you don't really know how you're doing. And I've been surprised by the assessment marks that I've gotten back for a lot of my work.
Okay.
And sometimes it's just like learning by rote what the procedures and expectations are, because in no way are they intuitive or obvious to me.
Sure.
I do have ideas about like less structured stuff, like interacting with a customer. There's like for software development, when it comes to making sure that your product is what's actually being asked for, is to take an empirical approach and constantly check back with the person that you're making the thing for, that you're making the thing that they actually wanted, as opposed to the thing that they sort of vaguely alluded to wanting. Because often people are really, really, really bad at saying what they want, especially from a complicated project. And there's other things, like I've tried to go through and learn things like project management, planning, and what have you. But that gets into a different topic of how to lead a group of people. And I understand in theory, but I'm just really disinclined to leadership positions.
All right. Well, let's talk about that a little. Let's say that you need to press somebody or a group of people. What methods do you use, and how does that play out?
I usually just don't bother because that's such a hassle. But like, if I have to work with people, then I usually find myself in a more, I don't know, like not at the front of the group. Like I much prefer to just deal with people's motivations, see how they're holding up, and like look after the way that they relate to the work, rather than, yeah, if that makes sense.
Okay, so if you find yourself in a situation where you do need to apply some force, or like let's say you're facing some opposition of some kind, how do you handle yourself in those situations?
Usually opposition can be reasoned with. But if they're like super aggro and committed to being defiant, then what can you do? Sometimes it's just outside of your your skill set to manage that kind of an attitude. But I think most attitudes can be managed because, after all, there's a person behind them, and most people aren't like toxic or manipulative or masterminds or whatever. They're just like disgruntled or they have some other issue. When it comes to leading things, I tend to not have the stamina or focus to be able to direct people. It's like trying to herd cats. Unless there's like certain tasks are much easier for me to lead because then I can lead through enthusiasm, and I can lead through looking after people's cognitive and emotional states rather than keeping them focused on a task. Because otherwise, like I said, it's like herding cats. I don't have the focus to make other people focused. I don't even have the focus to make myself focused.
Right, gotcha.
Why am I here again?
All right, so let's change the subject here. Do you feel it's acceptable to express emotions in public?
No, absolutely unacceptable. People who express emotions in public fill me with disgust and vitriolic rage. My God. Okay, no,
Can you think of any examples of inappropriate emotions to express in public?
I definitely. I think that people who show way too much hostility, people who erode group dynamics, people who show hostility towards their peers and people cooperating with them on tasks, are just there's a better way of dealing with that. And I think anger is sometimes anger is appropriate, but other times anger is something that I need to step in and be like, it's okay, we're all friends here, we're all working towards the same thing. Talk to me. Deep breaths. It's all gonna be okay.
Okay. So you feel pretty comfortable in a lot of situations if somebody's behaving like that, you can.
I am the staff chick of groups that I'm in. I try to make sure that people are happy and cooperating and not fighting with people that they are meant to be cooperating with.
All right.
That's why I like playing healers in MMOs. Actually, okay, so that goes back to leadership. I do enjoy, I guess, in video games, because there's somewhat more structure. I think leadership in video games more involves, just understanding how things work and understanding how to communicate to other people what their role is. And video games are much more structured than other tasks. And I've had difficulty leading less structured play experiences, and I've had difficulty leading things like group projects at university just because I guess no one really listens to me in the latter or in the former. I don't really know how to get people to act towards goals in a way that I think is optimal. People usually just cohesion just breaks down because people just become chaotic individuals in the same space rather than a team that's loosely moving towards the same thing.
All right. So, next question. What does moral mean? What is immoral, and how do you understand these terms, and does your understanding of it correlate with that of others? And how do you evaluate the correctness of your own understanding of morality?
So I think there's a distinction between morality and ethics. I think ethics is a form of practiced and reasoned morality, and I think morality is an interplay of basic sort of social needs and circumstantiality. And I think morality can vary through time and space, right? So there's this idea that conservatism is related to just the warmth of your climate and parasite load. So, as you get closer to the equator, people become more right-wing. And this is a thing that actually exists. You can pour it in a cup and measure it. So people's morality actually people's morality, like sense of morality, is correlated with the latitude that they grew up in and where they've spent most of their life. And I think ethics is something that can be universal. Like, you can teach anyone ethics, and they can obviously choose to agree or disagree with it, but you can teach ethics to anyone. And I try to base my morality on ethics rather than just my innate sense of disgust and anger and right and wrong and joy. Because I think morality can just be a very like limbic, very emotional thing, whereas ethics is an interplay between those innate sort of senses of what's good and bad and like actually trying to reason through them. And I think ethics can also fall down because when you try to like there's these two layers of humans. We each have this animalistic layer and we have this like socialized, reasoned, unemotional layer. And when you try and have something that's the best of both worlds, you just wind up with something that's sometimes the best of both worlds, but sometimes also the worst of both worlds. And like sometimes you can also have like implementation or translation difficulties, like something that you know is rationally correct is really difficult to implement in practice, unless you like do some extreme meta-level hacking to change the way that you feel about things, which is completely possible, but I haven't always found a path forward to do that. And I mean, obviously, ethics is partially subjective. Like, everyone has their own system of ethics. Like, some people are utilitarians, some people are virtue ethicists, some people are deontologists, and you shouldn't talk to them. Like, just cut them out of your life. And I like virtue ethics because I think it's about creating a process that cultivates an ideal person, up even to a hero. Like I try to be a dreamer, in the way that Joseph Campbell uses that, like a prototypical hero, because I think heroism is something rare and powerful and something that you can only be awarded with at the end of your life by other people. But you can always dream. Dream is always there for you. And through dream and storytelling, you can always rise to something better than where you were a moment ago.
All right, excellent. So you can sort of change your own emotional state purposely like that through...
It's not even emotional state, but like emotional reactions, I think, are highly mutable. So the way that you emotionally relate to the world is very much... well, not easy to mutate, but it's certainly hackable with a little bit of effort and a little bit of thought.
All right.
So, like, I think one way to encourage veganism is first to go through the reasoned reasons why animal suffering is bad, and then work through cultivating emotional responses towards animal products. Like, I feel bad every time I consume some sort of animal product. I'm like, this came from an animal that was tortured and exploited, and that doesn't make me feel good.
So you use your emotions to change your morality.
No, I think morality is emotions, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So your morality is your emotional reaction to certain social behaviors and actions. Social and personal behaviors.
Okay. So,
and ethics is the cultivated attempt to guide morality.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to make a statement, and I want you to just say what you think of it.
Mm-hmm.
Ideas do not have to be correct in order to be good.
Wow, like the words, like correct is unambiguous, but good is a very, very overloaded concept. Like, good in what sense? Like, ideas don't have to be correct to be beautiful, and they can be good in like an emotional, aesthetic way. And they can be good in the sense that everything, like, history should always be preserved. We should always know where we've been, where we come from, what mistakes have been made. But if it's not correct, like if it doesn't provide the ability to model reality, then it's not good in an instrumental sense. And I think that's my thoughts on that.
Okay. All right. Let's.
And I mean, you can have things that are. You can also have good in like an ethical sense. So things can be, certain ideas can be pro-social even if they're not conformant to reality.
Okay. I'm sorry, just 1 second. Do you need help creating forecasts and determining how something will end? And do you trust those forecasts?
I don't think I need help with that. Like I usually live in a state of, either excessive awareness or excessive certainty about something's final form in the near future or far future. I've never felt like I've needed help with that. It's just always in my mind. Like when I look at something, I see where it's come from and where it's going. Like that's an inextricable part of my experience of reality. That's why I'm called Sand, right?
Tell us about that. Why are you called Sand?
Why am I called Sand? At first it was because I was really, really badly depressed, and I was just like, everything's form will shatter and fade. Everything I've known will pass to sand and dust and ash. And it's my way of, but it's evolved into becoming, my version of this too shall pass. Like, yes, everything changes, but that's not a bad thing. Like everything bad in your life will lift up, and everything good in your life is to be cherished while it lasts. And it's sort of become my rallying cry to get through everything, and it's made my life a lot better. It's in the years that I've been calling myself that. And I just love the imagery and the symbolism of sand, like the sands of time and the infinite sands of the desert and uncountable objects and what have you. And I'm called Holon on Google for the same reason. Like a holon is a whole that's also part of a larger whole. And I just love philosophical, poetic stuff like that.
All right, good deal, perfect. What about, all right, when you meet a stranger, what can you say about them right away? And how do you know what the person is all about? Does it take long to understand someone's traits?
I think so. Like it takes a while to learn how someone relates with the world, like how they think, how they feel, how they tend to react to certain things. And it's always a slow process of just picking up on bits and pieces. And even if like you meet someone and you have 10 hours of super deep conversations, you still need to get past all of the layers of like learned responses and personae down to the to the seed that inspires all of those things, all of the ways that a person has learned to present themselves to the world. But in terms of like first impressions, I don't know. I think my first impressions are usually wrong because my first impressions are what people want me to think about them, or what people want other people to think about them. So like I made a new friend last month, and first impression was this like super calm, grounded, slightly dominant person, but it turns out that she's very much riddled with doubt and insecurity, and it's interesting sort of having experienced the process of peeling those layers away bit by bit down to who a person actually is on the inside. I mean, I don't mean that in a dark way. Like, I don't mean that people will betray and disappoint you. I think it's always interesting to see what sorts of suffering people hide within. Because, again, going back to Joseph Campbell, because I've been reading him lately, and everything he said is on my mind, people have lost the sense of myth and shared suffering and shared triumph. And so people are always like, this is totally off topic, sorry, always locked away inside their own private neuroses and nightmares, and they don't have the strength of myth to guide them through life. Anyway, I'm done with that.
All right, thank you.
I mean, I guess I notice how power structures work within a group. I'm always really interested in who relates with who in what way, who likes who commands respect, who the leaders are. things like that. That's always fairly vivid. Yeah, because it's really hard not to notice. Like, people usually wear their hearts on their sleeves when it comes to their relationships, less so with how they personally feel about life in general. I'm trying to go through like body language and things like that. I don't know. It usually takes me a while to process and think through certain nonverbals, like how people carry themselves and how people's like vibe changes in response to various things.
Okay. What is sympathy, and when do you express it, and when is it advised not to, and when you are expressing it, how do you express it?
So when it's advised not to, I think when you show sympathy to people, that changes, or when you're talking with someone, like this has come up in my life because I met a very bad character who is very well integrated into a bunch of social networks that I'm in. And I'm always wary about showing too much sympathy for him because I don't want to characterize him as a sympathetic person. Because when you do that, then you tend to foster more positive relationships with that third person. But otherwise, I think sympathy is almost always appropriate because we're all just trying to get through life. We're all, lost and suffering. And so I think everyone is worth showing sympathy because I have a lot of effective empathy. Like, I feel people's suffering fairly vividly. And I don't think anyone should have to suffer. I don't think that's a natural part of life. I think that's one of the, like the disease processes running through society at the moment. I think sympathy is, I mean, you can model sympathy as being in contrast to empathy. Sympathy is just like some sort of social ritual, or it's pity. But I think sympathy can be, like I don't think you necessarily have to distinguish sympathy from empathy. I think empathy, the sensation of empathy can lead to displays of sympathy. But yeah, obviously there's that idea that sympathy is merely ritualistic or sympathy is condescending pity, but I don't think that's correct. I think sympathy is the act of showing a desire to help people. But I'm not a very cynical and, in fact, a very idealistic person, so that's some of my radically unusual worldview.
Great. So I have one more question for you, I believe. What does logical mean, and what is your understanding of it? Do you think it correlates with the common view, and is it easy for you to be logical?
I want to give the smart answer and say logical just means anything that obeys formal logic. I don't know. People can use logical in a lot of ways. Like I have this word intuitive that means obeys the implicit learned laws of logic of the world, and I think people occasionally use logical to mean intuitive. And I think there's also usage that's somewhat fallen out of logical meaning someone who's very rational and very reasoned about things. But I think that's been rolled more into rational, or perhaps cold-hearted, or depending on how you're feeling about the so-called logical person and whether you want to venerate or derogate them. Am I logical? I don't know. I don't tend to deal in high-quality, reasoned, rationed thought a lot. I tend to much rather just rely on natural language, just because it's faster and easier, and I am an incredibly lazy person. And that's why I much prefer narratives to logic, just because you can't be wrong about narratives. You can only be less right.
I think that's a good answer.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything necessarily more to say. I mean, I try to act logically in the sense of always acting ethically. Like, I try to reason out what the best possible response to certain social situations is. And I think that's a process of cultivation. Like, I've become less angry and I've become more sympathetic. And in that sense, perhaps I'm logical. because I do have, like, it's reasoned and cultivated, and I go back and think about how to deal with situations in the future, and bit by bit I do actually change the way that I act. Yeah, but in terms of like understanding statistics and knowing how to use my time well and stuff like that, I am a very deeply illogical and fast and loose sort of person.
All right. Well, I think that's all the information that we need, unless you have anything to add, David. Nope. Okay. So thank you for talking with me, and we're going to review this information, and yes, I agree with it. Good answers. We're going to review the information and let you know what we think your type is.
Awesome.
Great.
I eagerly await being told that I'm AI.
All right, awesome. So thank you very much.